What if you woke up tomorrow and discovered that the very organ that makes you human, your mind, had been quietly rewired to prefer distraction over depth, comfort over truth, and instant gratification over lasting fulfillment? What if the change was not inflicted upon you by force, but seduced into existence by your own choices? This isn't the premise of a speculative novel. It's the signature of the world we're already living in. Neuroscientists at leading research institutions have begun mapping what happens to the brain during prolonged exposure to algorithmically tailored social media feeds. And the findings are sobering. A 2021 iScience study tracked heavy smartphone users and discovered that increased interaction with social apps correlated with a measurable drop in the brain's dopamine synthesis capacity. That isn't just a statistical curiosity. Dopamine is a core chemical for motivation, focus, and the ability to take pleasure in achievement. Reduce its natural production, and you create a mind that craves more stimulation while becoming less able to enjoy it. The result, a cycle of endless seeking without satisfaction, a state every addict knows too well. Unlike other addictions, this one is wrapped in the language of empowerment. We tell ourselves we are connecting, learning, or relaxing, but beneath the marketing, the architecture of these platforms is engineered with the same behavioral principles that keep gamblers glued to slot machines. Skinner's work on variable reward schedules, where unpredictable rewards keep subjects engaged far longer than consistent ones, was never meant to be applied to billions of human beings at once. Yet today, that's precisely what fuels your news feed, your notifications, your For You page. Each swipe is the pull of a digital lever. Sometimes you get something amusing, sometimes infuriating, sometimes affirming. The uncertainty itself is the hook. If this sounds abstract, consider the human cost. In 2021, Facebook whistleblower Frances Haugen released internal research revealing that the company knew Instagram was damaging to teenage girls' mental health, but continued optimizing for engagement. The data showed rises in anxiety, depression, and body image issues directly linked to the app's algorithmic curation. This wasn't an accident. It was an accepted trade-off for keeping users scrolling. History shows us this isn't a new pattern. When the British Empire introduced cheap opium to China in the 19th century, it wasn't simply to profit from the drug trade. It was a way to keep a population docile, distracted, and easier to control. The difference today is that the substance is not a chemical you smoke. It's a constant stream of content engineered to bypass your conscious defenses. The frightening part is that we are not resisting this intrusion, we are embracing it. Every tap, like, and share is a vote for the very system that's eroding the mental capacities that made civilization possible. Sustained attention, independent thought, tolerance for uncertainty. The Roman poet Juvenal observed that the masses could be pacified with bread and circuses. We now carry the circus in our pockets, ready to perform on demand. And unlike ancient Rome, where the spectacle ended when you left the arena, our modern distractions follow us from the moment we wake until the moment we close our eyes. The result is not simply reduced productivity or fragmented focus. It's a redefinition of what it feels like to be human. We are conditioning ourselves to avoid anything that requires effortful engagement. Books feel too long. Conversations too slow, complex problems too exhausting. The algorithms are not neutral mirrors, they are sculptors, shaping what you notice, how long you notice it, and what you ignore entirely. The 47-second average attention span recorded in recent studies is not a technological glitch. It's the predictable outcome of this sculpting. Philosophers from Marcus Aurelius to Soren Kierkegaard have warned that the quality of your life is determined by the quality of your attention. To lose control of your attention is to lose control of the very stage on which your thoughts, values, and identity are formed. We now live in a time where that stage is being leased to corporations whose profits depend on ensuring you never sit with discomfort, never linger in ambiguity. Never challenge the narrative that the next scroll will finally deliver satisfaction. But satisfaction never comes. The deeper tragedy is that this process feels voluntary, even pleasurable. We congratulate ourselves for being informed, entertained, engaged, while our cognitive endurance quietly decays. Aldous Huxley, nearly a century ago, imagined a society in which people would love their own oppression, asking for more of it, mistaking servitude for freedom. In his Brave New World, the citizen's drug of choice was soma, bliss without consequence, pleasure without meaning. Today, our soma glows from screens. We take it in fragments, hundreds of times a day, never realizing how each microdose is reshaping the architecture of our minds. This is where our story begins. Not with the invention of the technology, nor with the first addictive app, but with the moment we stopped asking whether constant stimulation was making us better or worse. That moment has passed. Now, the only question left is whether we have the will to reclaim our minds before they are no longer capable of wanting to be reclaimed. When Aldous Huxley published Brave New World in 1931, he was not trying to frighten readers with images of soldiers marching in lockstep or secret police banging on doors at night. His genius was in recognizing a subtler danger, that human beings could be persuaded to love their own captivity. Huxley imagined a world in which citizens were not coerced into obedience through fear, but coaxed into it through pleasure. Pleasure so constant, so reliable, and so easily obtained that no one would care to question what it cost them. Years later, reflecting on the book's reception, he admitted in a letter that he had grown less optimistic since writing it. The nightmare of total organization, he warned, is now awaiting us just around the next corner. It is worth noting that Huxley's vision stood in contrast to George Orwell's. In 1984, control is maintained by pain, scarcity, and terror. In Huxley's imagined future, control is maintained by abundance, of entertainment, of comfort, of distraction. Orwell's citizens are beaten into submission. Huxley's are lulled into it. Neil Postman, in his book Amusing Ourselves to Death, put it plainly. Orwell feared those who would deprive us of information. Huxley feared those who would give us so much that we would be reduced to passivity and egoism. The world we inhabit today has elements of both, but the architecture of social media more closely mirrors Huxley's prediction. Huxley's soma was a chemical shortcut to bliss, a way to eliminate discomfort without addressing its source. It didn't challenge the individual to adapt or grow. It numbed the impulse to do so. Our modern equivalent does not come in pill form. It arrives as an infinite feed of curated videos, images, and headlines designed to evoke a rapid emotional response, then dissolve just as quickly, leaving the user primed for the next dose. TikTok and Instagram are not simply repositories of content. They are precision-engineered delivery systems for micro-pleasures calibrated to keep the mind from lingering in any state too long. Recent studies have quantified the results. The average attention span has fallen from a few minutes to under a minute in the past 20 years. This isn't just a cultural quirk. It's a measurable cognitive shift. A brain habituated to such rapid turnover becomes impatient with complexity and intolerant of ambiguity. In practical terms, that means a dwindling capacity for the very mental habits that built civilization. Reading deeply, reasoning through conflicting ideas, envisioning long-term outcomes. Historian Yuval Noah Harari has warned that a population unable to maintain focus is a population unable to maintain freedom, because freedom requires both vigilance and the ability to think beyond immediate gratification. The parallel to Huxley's world becomes sharper when you consider the mechanism of control. In Brave New World, the state uses entertainment and pleasure not merely as diversions, but as tools for shaping what people care about, how they spend their attention, and ultimately, what they believe is worth pursuing. Today, this shaping is performed by algorithms whose design goals are not civic harmony or human flourishing, but maximum engagement. In Huxley's time, such control would have required an organized bureaucracy. Now, it is automated, distributed, and personalized at scale. And this is where another thinker enters the conversation, Shoshana Zuboff, who coined the term surveillance capitalism. She describes it as the unilateral claiming of private human experience as free raw material for translation into behavioral data. The purpose of that data is not only to predict behavior, but to shape it, turning each user into a more compliant participant in the attention economy. It's the same principle Huxley foresaw, but updated for an era where your every click, pause, and swipe is recorded, analyzed, and fed back to you as part of a behavioral feedback loop. The danger is not limited to diminished focus. The deeper threat lies in the way these systems train us to think about thinking itself. In Huxley's novel, intellectual excitement and deep feeling are considered destabilizing to the social order. The easiest way to prevent them is to ensure they never arise. In our time, the algorithm achieves something similar. It encourages content that triggers quick war, low-effort reactions, outrage, amusement, tribal affirmation, while suppressing what requires patience or nuanced consideration. Over time, this tilts the collective conversation toward the shallow and the certain, leaving little space for the difficult or the complex. Consider this. When was the last time you let your mind wander through an idea without interruption for more than a few minutes? When did you last feel the weight of boredom and allow it to carry you somewhere unexpected? Most people cannot recall, not because such states are impossible, but because their habits now avoid them entirely. The loss is not just personal, it is civilizational. Without the capacity for sustained attention, the long arc of human achievement, from philosophy to science to art, becomes impossible to sustain. The Renaissance did not happen in 47-second increments. The truth Huxley intuited is that control through pleasure is more insidious than control through pain because it feels voluntary. No one is forcing us to tap the screen. No one is threatening us if we put the phone down. And yet, most cannot. The power of this mechanism lies precisely in that paradox. It feels like freedom, even as it narrows the range of our thoughts, limits our patience, and trains us to mistake stimulation for meaning. And so the question is not whether Huxley was right. It is whether we will notice the world he warned about before it becomes so familiar we can no longer imagine life outside of it. If Huxley showed us the blueprint for control through pleasure, our modern systems have perfected the machinery. The human mind, for all its complexity, is still bound by ancient survival mechanisms. Among the most powerful is the instinct for social proof, the tendency to look to others to determine what is normal, acceptable, and worth pursuing. In a small village or tight-knit community, this instinct is adaptive. It helps individuals align with a group to survive. But in a digital environment where others means a carefully curated flood of algorithmically selected opinions, jokes, and images, social proof becomes a lever of manipulation. It no longer reflects reality. It reflects the platform's design goals. The result is what researchers call manufactured consensus, the illusion that everyone thinks the same way you do. Because the algorithm keeps showing you examples of people who confirm your worldview. It feels validating, even empowering, but it comes at a cost. The erosion of your ability to tolerate difference. When disagreement appears, it feels threatening rather than thought-provoking. Over time, this shapes not only what you believe, but how you form beliefs at all. Your identity becomes less a product of independent reasoning and more a collage of borrowed attitudes, assembled from the digital environment you inhabit. This is not speculation, it is measurable. Studies in cognitive neuroscience show that repeated exposure to content designed to evoke rapid emotional reactions strengthens neural pathways associated with reflexive responses while weakening those involved in reflective processing. In plain terms, the brain becomes better at reacting than at reasoning. The platforms reward this shift. Outrage garners more clicks than nuance. Certainty is more shareable than doubt. In this economy, the attention given to a post has more value than the accuracy of its content. Historically, societies have always wrestled with the tension between individual thought and collective conformity. The philosopher Alexis de Tocqueville, observing American democracy in the 19th century, warned of a tyranny of the majority in which social pressures would discourage independent judgment. But even Tocqueville could not have imagined a landscape where these pressures were not limited to town halls or printed editorials, but reached into the pocket of every citizen at all hours, amplified by invisible code that learns, adapts, and refines its ability to hold your gaze. The effect is subtle but profound. 10 years ago, you might have read a full article before forming an opinion. Now, many skim a headline, glance at a few comments, and adopt a stance within seconds. The platforms train impatience with complexity, And impatience with complexity inevitably breeds oversimplification. When this becomes the norm, the shared intellectual foundation that allows for reasoned dialogue begins to fracture. Disagreement turns into hostility. Curiosity is replaced by confirmation seeking. The echo chamber becomes not just a feature of the environment, but a feature of the mind itself. We are already seeing the consequences. Polarization deepens. Public discourse becomes a contest of competing certainties, each side convinced not only of its correctness, but of the absurdity or malice of the other. In this climate, genuine dialogue is rare, and when it occurs, it is often drowned out by the noise. The tragedy is not merely the loss of civility. It is the loss of our collective ability to solve problems that require cooperation across differences. History offers sobering reminders of where such fragmentation can lead. Societies unable to reconcile internal divisions become vulnerable to external threats, or they collapse under the weight of their own discord. Yet the trap persists because it feels good. It is pleasant to see one's opinions mirrored back, to feel part of a larger movement, to belong. Social validation delivers a chemical reward, reinforcing the very patterns that narrow our thinking. This is why Huxley's insight remains so potent. When control aligns with desire, resistance becomes psychologically counterintuitive. We are less likely to question what we enjoy, even if it quietly diminishes us. And here lies the paradox. The more predictable our responses become, the easier we are to control. A society of individuals who react in uniform ways to the same triggers is a society primed for manipulation. In Huxley's fictional world, this uniformity was achieved through genetic engineering and conditioning from birth. In ours, it is achieved through the steady, invisible pressure of algorithmic curation. We do not need state-run hatcheries to produce standardized minds. We have devices in our hands that do it voluntarily and at scale. If there is a common thread linking all of this, it is the gradual surrender of our tolerance for discomfort. Discomfort is the crucible of growth, the space in which we wrestle with uncertainty, confront unfamiliar ideas, and discover our own capacity for adaptation. Without it, learning stagnates, creativity wanes, and the ability to navigate complexity atrophies. A species that cannot bear the tension of not knowing will cling to whatever offers immediate resolution, even if that resolution is false. And when enough individuals operate this way, the collective intelligence of the society declines. This is why the current trajectory is not just a matter of individual well-being, but a question of human survival in the broadest sense. The threats we face: climate instability, geopolitical conflict, technological upheaval cannot be addressed in 47-second bursts of attention. They require sustained focus, nuanced reasoning, and cooperation among people who see the world differently. Yet we are conditioning ourselves to avoid precisely those states of mind. If this sounds like an irreversible slide, it is not. But the longer we remain in the trap, the more effort it will take to climb out. And the first step in that effort is to see the trap for what it is, even if doing so is uncomfortable, especially if it is uncomfortable. If the mechanisms shaping us are powerful, it is because they are built on truths about the human mind that have existed for millennia. Yet the same biology that makes us vulnerable to manipulation also grants us the ability to adapt. This is the promise of neuroplasticity, the brain's capacity to rewire itself in response to new experiences, habits, and environments. While the algorithms thrive on our automatic responses, neuroplasticity allows us to create new patterns. Even after years of reinforcement in the opposite direction, the change is neither instantaneous nor effortless, but it is possible. Research in behavioral sciences found that individuals who stepped away from social media for as little as 2 weeks showed measurable improvements in focus, mood, and cognitive function. This was not a fringe experiment. It was a reminder that the brain begins to reclaim its baseline abilities the moment the constant drip of stimulation is interrupted. Similar results have been observed in schools that restrict phone use. In France, where smartphones are banned in classrooms for students under 15, test scores have risen and interpersonal engagement has improved. The benefits are not mystical. They are the predictable outcomes of removing an obstacle to sustained attention. But resistance in the digital age is not about rejecting technology entirely. To do so would be both impractical and counterproductive. The challenge is to distinguish between tools that serve our long-term flourishing and those that exploit our vulnerabilities for short-term gain. A collaborative encyclopedia like Wikipedia, an educational platform that deepens understanding, a design tool that facilitates creation. These are technologies that extend human capacity. By contrast, platforms that thrive on outrage cycles, instant validation, and compulsive checking are built to contract it. The work is in consciously choosing which systems we allow to shape our minds. Practical measures can support this choice. Applications like freedom or 1. Insert a pause between impulse and action, forcing the prefrontal cortex, the seat of rational decision-making, to engage before the thumb swipes. Focus modes and scheduled offline periods are not luxuries. They are acts of cognitive self-defense. Even physical changes to the environment, charging your phone outside the bedroom, keeping it off the table during meals, restore moments of unbroken thought that the constant presence of a device would otherwise fracture. Yet tools alone will not suffice without a guiding principle. That principle must be the preservation of the qualities that make us human: creativity, empathy, wisdom, and the ability to transcend immediate circumstance in pursuit of something higher. These capacities do not emerge by default. They require cultivation, time spent in reflection, in conversation, in the slow work of building understanding. Without deliberate protection, they erode under the weight of more immediate pleasures. Huxley believed that awareness was the first defense. Understanding the mechanism of control does not automatically break its hold, but it makes resistance possible. In his later essays, he emphasized the necessity of education for freedom, training the mind not only to think critically, but to recognize and resist the forces that seek to make thinking itself obsolete. Today, that education must include a fluency in how algorithms work, how dopamine pathways adapt, and how seemingly benign choices can accumulate into significant cognitive shifts. The work of resistance is both personal and collective. Individually, it may look like choosing to read a difficult book instead of scrolling, engaging in a conversation that challenges your assumptions, or sitting with an unresolved question without rushing to a search bar for closure. Collectively, it may involve advocating for design ethics in technology, supporting policies that protect cognitive health, or building communities that value depth over speed. Each act is small, but together they form a countercurrent against the stream of engineered distraction. Extinction, as Huxley imagined it, was not the annihilation of bodies, but the evaporation of what makes human life meaningful. It was cognitive, emotional, and spiritual, an erasure from the inside out. But just as extinction events in nature can give rise to new forms of life, this crisis presents an opportunity to evolve into a species capable of wielding its tools without being ruled by them. The choice is not between progress and preservation, but between unconscious surrender and conscious stewardship. Every moment of reclaimed attention is a vote for the latter. Every time you delay the reflex to check your phone, you affirm the capacity to inhabit the present fully. Each time you invest in learning, creating, or grappling with complexity, you reinforce the mental endurance that has carried our species through centuries of challenge. The algorithms will not stop trying to claim your mind, but your mind, unlike any machine, can choose its master. The future will be decided not by those who scroll the fastest, but by those who think the deepest. The question, as always, is whether you will be among them. The choice is still yours, but only if you make it deliberately, and soon, and thanks to the resilience written into our very biology. It is never too late to begin.